Okay, so you want to run a professional heist crew targeting armored cash transports during the golden age of the great American robberies, somewhere between the roaring 20s and the years following the Second World War. The vision is intoxicatingly simple and endlessly romanticized, painting a picture where you and a hand-picked crew of sharply dressed specialists intercept a lumbering steel truck, brandish a few submachine guns, intimidate the guards without firing a single shot, and disappear into the ether with canvas bags bulging with untraceable millions before retiring to a sun-drenched coastal haven. The reality is an entirely different economic nightmare. Consider the infamous 1950 Brinks robbery in Boston, a crime that baffled authorities for years and was long considered the perfect unsolved heist. What the romantic retellings deliberately omit is that the crew spent over 2.5 years and the equivalent of nearly 300 days of a skilled carpenter's wages just on preliminary research, copying keys, removing lock cylinders, and renting observation posts before they ever touched a single dollar bill. An armored car heist is not a quick score. It is a highly leveraged, capital-intensive, low-margin illicit startup with staggering overhead costs that will bleed you dry long before the police ever pick up your trail. To even begin planning an operation of this scale, you need massive upfront capital because you cannot recruit hardened, reliable men on the mere promise of future wealth. You are hiring specialized labor in a high-risk, unregulated market shaped by severe economic conditions. Following the First World War, there was a vast surplus of combat-trained men, which theoretically lowered the cost of hiring muscle. But a truly skilled safecracker, an alarm bypass expert, or a reliable enforcer requires substantial retainer fees. During the Great Depression, an era characterized by a severe famine of legitimate capital and stable jobs, a standard factory worker might be lucky to earn $20 a week. In contrast, a professional underworld specialist will demand hundreds of dollars in advance just to sit at the planning table. This is because their opportunity cost is incredibly high, and the severe risk of death or a 20-year prison sentence must be mathematically priced into their labor. Furthermore, you must factor in the catastrophic cost of workplace injuries. If a crew member is shot during a dry run or an altercation, you cannot take them to a public hospital. You must hire an underground surgeon who might charge the equivalent of a brand new automobile just to remove a bullet in a dirty basement, with absolutely zero guarantee of survival, and a massive risk of lethal infection. If you assemble a core crew of 6 men, you are paying out the equivalent of 2 full years of honest blue-collar wages before you even scout your target. Procuring the necessary equipment introduces another massive drain on your initial capital. You cannot use your own personal automobile for the job, nor can you simply hotwire a random car on the street, because a standard civilian vehicle will break down under the immense physical weight of stolen coin and heavily armed men. You must purchase the services of a professional auto theft ring to procure high-end, heavy-duty vehicles, typically Lincolns, Cadillacs, or Packards, outfitted with powerful engines and reinforced suspensions. The theft ring will charge anywhere from $50 to $100 per vehicle for clean, untraceable cars featuring swapped license plates and filed engine blocks. You need a minimum of 3 vehicles to execute the operation properly: an intercept vehicle to physically block the armored car, a heavily laden transfer vehicle to haul the raw loot, and a clean drop car parked miles away for the final inconspicuous escape. Alongside the vehicles, you must rent secure, heated garages in discreet locations to hide them for months during the exhaustive planning phase. Landlords who cater to illicit activities operate under a shadow monopoly and charge steep premiums, often double or triple the standard market rent. If a standard commercial warehouse lease costs $50 a month, you are easily paying $150, entirely in cash, simply to purchase the landlord's silence. Over a 6-month planning period, this idle real estate cost alone devours the equivalent of roughly half a year of a public school teacher's salary. The arms and munitions required to breach an armored transport represent yet another massive capital sink. Armored transport companies in the 1920s and 30s recognized the rising threat and began rapidly retrofitting their fleets with heavy steel plating, impenetrable gun ports, and bullet-resistant glass. A standard civilian revolver will do nothing but scratch the exterior paint. You require military-grade hardware to pose a credible threat. Authentic submachine guns, purchased through corrupt dealers or black market armories, cost around $200 apiece during this era, which translates to over a month of a seasoned bricklayer's labor for just one weapon. You need several of them, alongside shotguns, reliable sidearms, tear gas canisters, and perhaps dynamite if you intend to blow the rear doors off their hinges. Dynamite requires a highly specialized handler, adding yet another contracted laborer whose exorbitant fee cuts directly into your profit margins. If you choose to use explosives, you also introduce the severe risk of incinerating the very paper currency you are trying to steal, instantly turning a highly profitable venture into a total catastrophic loss in a fraction of a second. Even if you secure the upfront capital, hire the best labor, and procure flawless equipment, you cannot simply execute an operation in a major city without paying the mandatory underworld taxes. The organized crime syndicates of the era effectively operate under rigid, unbreakable guild rules, maintaining strict geographical monopolies over all illicit activities within their territories. If you run an independent heist crew in Chicago, New York, or Boston, you must kick up a percentage of your total take to the local political bosses or mob lieutenants. This street tax is strictly enforced and is usually fixed between 10 and 20% of your gross revenue. It is simply the cost of doing business in a regulated underworld market. If you refuse to pay this extortion, the syndicate will not necessarily waste resources hunting you down. They will simply provide your real names, vehicle descriptions, and safe house addresses to the local police department, effectively utilizing municipal law enforcement as their own taxpayer-funded private security and pest control force. Armored cash transports do not run on predictable, easily exploitable schedules unless you possess high-level inside information. You must purchase the absolute loyalty of a dispatcher, a senior bank clerk, or a veteran guard. This individual holds a monopoly on the routing data you desperately need and is taking on catastrophic personal and legal risk by conspiring with you. They will never accept a flat fee for this service. The going rate for a reliable inside man on a major metropolitan cash route is typically a 10 to 20% cut of the final gross haul. If your target truck is carrying $100,000, you instantly owe this silent partner $10,000 to $20,000 before your crew even splits the remaining shares. That is a staggering sum, equivalent to 10 or 15 years of a typical bank clerk's legitimate salary, automatically deducted from your revenue stream the moment the heist is completed. When the day of the ambush finally arrives, you must confront the brutal physical reality and logistical nightmare of the loot itself. The romantic myth assumes that the money is neatly packed in lightweight, high-denomination bills. However, armored cars primarily transport commercial deposits and vast industrial payrolls. Payrolls mean staggering quantities of silver coins, copper pennies, and small-denomination $1 and $5 bills meant to fill the weekly pay envelopes of factory workers. $1 million in mixed small currency and coinage weighs literal tons. A single standard canvas bank bag filled with silver dollars weighs over 50 pounds and contains a mere $1,000. If your intelligence tells you a truck is carrying $50,000 in silver and small change, your crew is faced with the agonizing task of physically transferring over 2,500 pounds of dead weight from a damaged armored truck into your getaway car, often while under active gunfire or with police sirens wailing in the near distance. The sheer physical stamina required limits the actual amount of profit you can manually extract before the window of escape permanently closes. You may successfully breach a truck holding hundreds of thousands of dollars, but your crew can only physically carry away a fraction of it before the risk of capture becomes absolute. The escape route introduces its own severe economic and logistical risks, largely dictated by the era's transportation infrastructure. Navigating the road network of the early 20th century is inherently treacherous. Fleeing into rural areas means risking your heavily laden, overloaded getaway car sinking into unpaved, muddy roads, trapping you in a ditch alongside a ton of stolen silver. Fleeing through urban corridors requires navigating absolute choke points, such as newly constructed toll bridges and turnpikes. Handing a toll operator a coin while driving a vehicle filled with masked men and stolen canvas bags is a fatal vulnerability, as these operators are highly observant and are immediately interviewed by authorities after any major regional crime. To bypass these land-based traps, sophisticated crews often transition their escape routes to river or sea transport. You might hire a fast rum runner's boat to move the crew and the cash down the Mississippi River or out into the Atlantic toward safe havens in the Caribbean. However, maritime smugglers charge exorbitant fees, often demanding a flat rate of thousands of dollars or a direct percentage of the loot. Furthermore, when you are miles offshore on a boat heavily outnumbered by armed smugglers, surrounded by bags of untraceable cash, you are entirely at their mercy. The risk of being quietly robbed, murdered, and thrown overboard by the very transport contractors you hired is a grim reality that has erased more than one successful heist crew from the historical record. Assuming you survive the ambush, navigate the treacherous escape routes, and reach your safe house, the heist is now officially categorized as unsolved by the public. The newspapers read about your brilliant,